everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is Louisa, and this channel is devoted to helping people with mental health crises, cross spiritual crises. Often there's a crossover there. So, yeah, and as many of you know, I have lived experience of hearing voices and recovery from schizophrenia. So I like to share resources and ideas on these topics occasionally, and I have neglected the topic of hearing voices for some time in my videos. So here is a, as succinct as I can make it, summary of some coping strategies for distressing, hostile voices. This has to be the number one question that I'm asked when I'm running a group or just general inquiries from people. How do I cope? And of course, like everything in mental health, there isn't a single quick fix. There are just so many ideas that you can draw on. So as I said, it's going to be hard to make it succinct, but I'm going to try. And to guide me, I've created a handout, Coping with Voices, Ideas for and from Voice Hearers. So this handout I'm going to make available on my website as a free resource that you can download. And I really want people to be able to have it at their fingertips and also know that this hasn't come from clinicians. This has come from some clinicians who have worked with voice hearers for many years and devoted themselves, like the beautiful John Watkins, who wrote Unshrinking Psychosis and many other wonderful books on the subject. But it's also come from voice hearers themselves, and it's a compilation. So it's a little bit of ideas from myself as well as many others and people I've worked with. So I'll try and thank or reference the people as I go, but I probably will miss. So my apologies to anyone if I've taken your idea and shared it here on YouTube. But let's do this in a spirit of sharing, because ultimately we're all just trying to help get through something that can be really, really distressing. I know for myself, when I first started hearing voices, I was hearing them 24/7, so all the time, usually worse at night, which is very, very common. That's where these coping strategies might be useful. But yeah, please know that there is hope, and it can and does get better for people. And most people, even if they don't have a resource like this or somebody to guide them, some kind of peer support or therapist or something, most people figure out ways to cope. So you are not doomed to be stuck with this forever, miserable. That's the message. That's the main message of hope. So let's dive in. Yeah, to these suggestions. But before I get to the actual coping strategies, I just want to give you the format of today's teaching. So first of all, I'm going to run through 5 kind of, I like to call them golden rules, but you can just call them general advice that will kind of give you an idea of the attitude that you need when you approach this work. Then we're going to look at coping with the most intense kind of voices, the really overwhelming ones, because that's usually when people cry out for help. So if you've come to this video because you are drowning with these voices and you don't know what to do and you're climbing the walls, then at least you can get a very quick snapshot of what you can do and then hit pause and come back later for the third section, which is coping ideas for ordinary times. Because most voice hearers find that when they begin this journey, the voices are very intense for a crisis period, but then they continue to hear them, often for years and years and years, sometimes for their whole life. So that might sound a bit depressing, but it's not, as I said before, because there's lots of ways that we can learn to live with them. There's lots of ways that we can even turn them into a positive thing. So we are talking about lots of different stages to the journey, and be mindful of the stage you're in right now when you're watching this, and know that there's some hope at the end of the tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel, but also just, concentrate on where you are right now and what you need. Okay, cool. So first of all, the 5 golden rules for your attitude to help make this easier and more beneficial and more efficient so that you will heal and recover from this experience. So the first thing to remember is that your voices are there for a reason. I'm just going to read directly from here because I kind of summed it up pretty succinctly on this piece of paper. What that reason is, you may not know yet, right? So they're there for a reason, but you might not know what it is yet. They got there somehow and they serve a purpose in the universe like everything. So be curious. Where do they come from? What could they represent? And how could you turn something difficult into a learning experience? So just knowing that it's not a random attack on you from, you know, from life itself. I think that kind of idea of this has just happened to me can create and get people stuck in a sense of victim. So I'm stuck and I'm entirely powerless. But if you start to see that the voices might be serving some kind of a purpose, and like I said, I don't want to guess what your purpose is, and you may not know right now, but if you can just hold space for that idea that they could be serving a purpose, even if it's to teach you something, to teach you how to be assertive, to teach you to stand up for yourself, something along those lines, to teach you to be more compassionate, that would be enough of a purpose. So that's the third thing. Your voices are there for a reason. Two, voices can be useful. So this kind of goes off the back of the first one. Voices are fascinating aspects of the human mind. In some societies and cultures, voice hearing is seen as a gift that can be harnessed. Many people who hear voices are spiritually sensitive, highly empathic, neurodiverse, or just charmingly odd. So, if you can see your experience as potentially positive, even if right now it is not positive at all, that again will just give you that little bit of a lift, that little bit of hope that you can follow and grow. Because remember, what you focus on grows. So if you want to focus on the positive and try to look for how they might be useful. Three, take charge of your journey. So voices can be downright horrible, but remember, it's your life. You still have choices, you still have power, and you always do. Now, you may not be choosing to hear voices, but you can choose how you respond to the voices. That is the greatest power that you have as a voice hearer. How do I respond? What am I going to do with this experience? Right? And it's the same for many things in life. When people are confronted with seemingly uncontrollable circumstances like a natural disaster or a war or something that's way beyond our control, the only thing we can control in those instances is how we respond and how we choose to make the most of it, make lemonade out of lemons. So take charge of your journey and know that you do have power. Four, be persistent in trying different things. This one is maybe the most important one because too often I will share coping strategies with people and then they will just not really try them, or maybe try them once and it doesn't work, so they don't try them again. There are many, many ways that voice hearers can learn to cope with and even control voices. And so it's important to try lots of different things and to be persistent. Even if the technique doesn't work immediately, it will often work after some practice. Yes, yes, yes. You are rewiring your brain, you are retraining yourself, you are training the voices to some extent as well, and we'll probably touch deeper on that in a minute. But everything is malleable, everything is pliable, nothing is stuck in cement in this world. If we know one thing, we know that change is certain. So keep trying, keep trying. Five, you can live well with voices, even if you hear voices. There are many, many voice hearers in the world who have no problem at all with distress, who have either learned to cope with them to such an extent that they don't even worry about them, or they've actually harnessed the experience and turned it into a positive, such as psychic channeling or receiving angelic messages or something like that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And however you end up understanding your own voices and what you end up doing with them, your life can be very successful and happy. So hearing voices does not equal a catastrophe of a life, a doomed life. That is sometimes the kind of the message you get in the mental health system. I know that when I first started hearing voices, it felt very doomed to me. And the message was, you're going to be hearing them forever and you're always going to need medication and you're always going to be sick. But I definitely challenge that. It's not been my experience. And I know lots and lots of speakers in the voice hearing community who speak out and say, wait a minute, could this just be viewed as a kind of a neurodiversity or a human variation like being left-handed? And while it's distressing, we can learn to live with it and maybe even thrive with it. So I hope you can keep those golden rules in mind as we proceed. And I will now move on to the all-important coping ideas for overwhelming voices. So these are the kind of voices that are constant, loud, hostile, upsetting. You can't sleep. The voices are saying awful things. And worse, you're wondering if they might be right. All right. So this is where the greatest distress in voice hearing comes from, is when we're just being hammered by these voices. And part of us wonders, is this actually true? So the voices are either saying really awful things about us or really awful things about others, or telling us to be afraid, or telling us that we're being hunted, or, it's always the distressing ones anyway. It's always a fear story. It's always some kind of story based in fear. And shame and guilt and all the messy emotions. So we want to, recognize that they're attacking our core belief system, that something in us is also wondering if they might be right? It's a bit like being in an abusive relationship, where you're being psychologically manipulated and gaslit and abused all the time, verbally abused. It wears you down. And I know for myself, when I was at my most intense moments of crisis with voice hearing, that I totally believed them. I believed everything they were saying, and it was terrifying, right? So I'm in no way minimizing the scariness of hearing voices in crisis like this, which is why when you're hearing these voices so intensely, no amount of yoga is going to help, is it? Yoga is a wonderful tool. Things like yoga, these are coping strategies for more ordinary times. But okay, I'm not going to say never, never, because for some of you, maybe yoga is like your most amazing strategy that solves all of your problems. But for me, it didn't work. Things like that didn't work. Things like walking or, phoning a friend or things like that just didn't work when I was in these crises. So for what the phrase that I used to come up with for these times was radical self-care is required. So it's almost like we don't even worry about the voices at this point, because the voices are there and they're overwhelming. What we need to focus on is ourselves. That's really what we need to focus on, radically caring for ourselves. So you're going to do everything in your power to take care of you. And these will be things like making sure you're in a safe, low stimulus environment. That's really important. Get away from crowds, get away from noise, get away from light, get away from places where you don't feel contained or safe. Talk to a trusted, calming person. It doesn't matter what you talk about, but their energy, their nervous system is going to help you regulate. And, sometimes for me, that was on the other end of Lifeline, one of these helplines, that you can call. That would sometimes do the trick. Or talking to my husband, or, if I was in hospital, of course, there was some people around that I could grab. But talk to a trusted, calming person. Things like taking a shower or a bath or doing something sensory. So something quite, if you really want to get radical, you could have a cold shower, something like that, or a really hot bath. It helps, anything sensory helps to get you out of your head and down into your body. And you'll notice that most of these radical self-care techniques are for that. They're all about calming the nervous system, because that's the main goal with the overwhelming voices, is you want to get calm. You want to get out of your fear flight response. That's, turning everything into fear, and calm down into a place where you're just breathing and you can relax a little bit, even if not completely, just a little bit will help you get some clarity. So things like sensory things, taking deep, steady breaths. again, a wonderful practice for regulating your nervous system. And when we're talking about radical, you might be talking about radical, like I have a wonderful one that I use from Wim Hof, which is taking 30 really deep breaths and then holding my breath for a couple of minutes, as long as I can, and exhaling and then doing it again. And you do it in a sort of a cycle of 3, and it's usually quite a good reset. Again, it's not going to necessarily take the voices away, but these things are quite circuit breaking. That's what you want. Um, Singing, humming, or chanting, they're a wonderful coping strategy even for non-overwhelming voices, because the sound of our own voice actually has been shown to relax our vagus nervous, stimulate our vagus nerve and relax our nervous system in general. So the sound of your own voice can just create that soothingness that you crave. And when you sing or you hum or you chant, the voices actually haven't got a chance to kind of get in there. So it can be a way of just blocking it out for the moment. One of the most effective ways I have is to put your fingers in your ears and hum like this. It looks like this. You can't hear what I'm doing there, but I can. My whole head cavity is filled up with the sound of my hum. And I find it really interesting, the power of tone on the nervous system. And perhaps there's some deeper meaning to the actual note that you choose when you hum, and you might want to experiment with different notes and see if they have a different effect on your nervous system. There's a whole school of psionics, I think it's called, which is the science of sound, that's a part of this. And for those nerdy people out there, that would be well worth researching. Um, any other grounding activities that help you stay calm, basically, in your radical self-care toolkit. Now, this one, going to hospital if it's a safe place for you. So I said before, make sure you're in a safe, low stimulus environment. That might not be possible at home, unfortunately. A lot of us don't live in safe, low stimulus environments. We might have children around, or lots of noisy neighbors, or we might live in a relationship that's not very healthy for us and is really triggering. And this is more and more common these days because people are struggling to live on their own if they want to, with housing crisis and so forth around the world. So we have a situation where a lot of us don't actually feel safe in our own homes. If that is the case, and you live in a country where you have a half decent mental health system, I recommend going to hospital, even just for a few days, to circuit break again, to be taken care of, to help you reset, to relax your nervous system. Of course, it's not going to work for everybody because some of us are highly traumatized by the hospital system. Sometimes the hospitals are awful, or it's just our personal experience, or we get very triggered by whatever goes on in them. So I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if you can find that kind of thing, then that's wonderful. If you can somehow get away or go and find shelter with a friend, maybe, who can give you a room or something where you can just stay safe until the storm passes, is very helpful. Um, and also taking PRN medication that goes in with the hospital as well. So if you have it prescribed, you might not want to take meds forever, but that's what medication is for, is times like these. And I know for myself that I tried to go through an unmedicated crisis psychosis for about 3 months. I did try and find respites and retreats, and I did everything that I'm describing here, but I really couldn't do it without the medication in the end. My nervous system was absolutely haywire. So this wasn't just a scary voice experience. It was also a nervous system that you know, was exploding. So in that situation, there was nothing else I found that could calm my nervous system in that way. And I still to this day have no problem with taking PRN medication if I need it. And I find that it works well for lots of people. So that could be an option for you in these circumstances. Lastly, reduce the fear with positive self-talk. This is so important because if you remember what I was saying before, it's actually this whole coping strategies here for overwhelming voices is all about calming the nervous system and reducing the fear. Now, the fear is born out of the stories and the the explanations and the things we're telling ourselves about these voices, about this experience. So while you might be hearing voices, there's another voice inside you, that's your voice saying, oh my God, it's going to be like this forever. Oh my God, I'm going mad. Oh my God, I'm the CIA are coming to get me. Oh my God, oh my God. That voice, you want to try to control and manage that voice of fear. Even if you can't logically argue with it right now, just try to put it on hold. Try to say to that part of you, you know what? Yes, I'm terrified right now, but I'm okay in this moment. I'm okay right now. I'm breathing and I'm going to do dot, 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 and we're going to get through this, right? So this kind of like just determination that you activate in your own self-talk. And you might find it more helpful to do it writing it down than speaking it in your thoughts, or speaking out loud is very powerful as well. Just saying things like, I am okay right now. I'm okay right now. You know, just trying to convince yourself and reduce that fear. That's really what you're after. So yeah, now is not the time to, and this is just as important, by the way, as the radical self-care. Now is not the time to doom scroll on social media. Get off the social media. It's a trigger minefield. And, you know, even if you've got like a really wonderful feed and you've got amazing friends and you've got lots of photos of kittens and puppies coming your way, there's very likely to be stuff in there, advertisements or someone else's opinion or whatever that is likely to be triggering. So it's just it's just a recommendation that I would give to anyone who's feeling overwhelmed is don't go there. And that includes things like YouTube. So you might have found me, which is great, but once you're finished with me, turn it off and, you know, go and read a nice book or listen to some nice music or watch a nice movie, but not expose yourself to random content, which may or may not trigger you. Definitely don't watch scary or overstimulating films. Remember that you are raw, your nervous system is raw, your mind is open. So you're going to be so sensitive to triggers. So you just want to make sure that whatever's going in there is calming and soothing. That's so important. Don't eat rubbish food or no food at all. Try to continue to put nourishing things into your body. Drink lots of water, fresh fruit and vegetables, grounding foods. Maybe meat might be good for you at this time, or eggs or cheese or something kind of comforting. What, you know, go with your intuition here, but don't neglect your body because that's going to play into it as well, right? That's going to kind of, you've got your fear thoughts going, and that's activating a neurochemical reaction within your body. And then it's got nothing to ground it, right? So it can start to sort of, the two things can work together then, the negative thoughts and the lack of nutrition. Don't stay awake all night. Really, really try again if you need to use PRNs. I realize when you're going through an intense experience like this, often sleep just disappears. So, you know, even if it is for a period of a week or two, get a prescription perhaps or see your doctor about that to help you to sleep, or at least lie there and rest, because that is even better than just pacing around the house or watching YouTube or something or Netflix all night, because again, you're stimulating yourself. You want to continually try to reduce nervous system stimulation. Don't drink coffee or energy drinks, please. Anything like that, or take drugs or drink alcohol, any kind of mind-altering substances. Leave them alone for the meantime. Instead, you know, go back to calming things like herbal teas and maybe a milk drink or something like that. Anything that makes you feel more sedated or sleepy. And don't talk to people who trigger you at this time. Please, you know, that brother, that sister, that father, that mother, that whoever, that neighbor, just protect yourself from those relationships for the moment. You can come back to them when you're feeling stronger, but for the moment, there is no point in antagonizing a situation. Again, you want it, this is radical self-care. This is like wrapping yourself in cotton wool and keeping yourself safe, knowing that it's not forever. It's going to pass. And when it passes, then you can step out and, be a little bit stronger and make that phone call or knock on the neighbor's door for whatever you need. Okay, so that was the coping ideas for the overwhelming voices. Now, in different places was things that you can apply for more ordinary times as well. But the next group of coping strategies I'm going to mention are definitely more about engaging with the situation, engaging with the voices in some sort of a way, learning to understand it more and building up your skills in awareness, self-awareness and emotional regulation and feeling your feelings and your understanding of your past and all of those things. So I'm going to now talk through a bit of a toolbox and ask you to remember golden rule number 4, which is be persistent in trying different things. Okay, so as I mentioned, a lot of these are ideas that I've tried myself, I've used with people, suggested to people. They've come from voice hearers telling me what's worked for them. So hopefully they might be useful for you. So number 1 is to track your voice activity and see what the triggers are. So with this one, you're going to keep what I call a voice diary, which is just a journal or a piece of paper. You can make it real simple and just kind of, have a couple of sections or just write things down. Do it any way you want, but you're going to keep a voice diary over a period of a few weeks. And you're looking for patterns like, when are the voices most active? Do certain things or people or events cause them to worsen? And how do you tend to respond? And is this helping or not? So just considering that, because often we don't realize it until we actually track it, until we do a bit of journaling. That's why journaling is so useful in healing, whether it's healing from some kind of physical pain or it's healing from a mental health problem like this. Knowing those triggers is going to be really useful for you to begin to understand how they might be connected to emotions. If it's a person that's triggering them, for example, that might be interesting to think about the history with that person. It might be a family member, for example. Your voices tend to get worse. It could just be as simple as stress. A lot of people find that when they get stressed, the voices activate. So even that's useful to know, because then you can start to think, okay, how do I reduce my stress, right? Which is the point number 2, working around triggers. Once you know what triggers your voices, you can work on strategies to work around those triggers. Sometimes you can avoid them, sometimes you can't. But if you can't, then how do you reduce distress? So by that, I mean, okay, maybe your voices get triggered. Let's say you're a uni student and you have to go to uni class, and they always get triggered when you walk in the door and you get a kind of like a social anxiety come up and the voices start telling you that, you look ugly and you shouldn't open your mouth, something along those lines. That's kind of, I was thinking of perhaps my own voices there at a time when I was studying as well. And I found it very, very challenging to go to uni. So I still needed to go to uni, right? So you have to think, all right, what can I do to mitigate that? And yeah, I mean, it might be about having a buddy at uni that knows that you might be feeling distressed. And that's something that I did. I found someone who also had similar experiences to me, and we sat together. And, if I was a bit anxious, at least I could let him know if I was hearing voices. And there was no shame and no problem. Another thing I did at uni was I registered as a person with a disability. And again, that was really handy because it meant that I actually had a phone number I could call if I was really distressed at uni. Somebody that would help me. I'm just turning my fan on because I live in Queensland and it's boiling. Um, yeah, so there's always something you can do. If it's a family member that triggers you, perhaps just make a rule that you're not going to answer your phone when you're feeling distressed, or if it's whatever, right? So you're going to find different ways to kind of work around these triggers. Oh, here I actually gave an example here, which is quite a good one. Because it's very common, if noisy, crowded shops trigger your voices, things like supermarkets or going out in, big places where there's lots of people, maybe you could wear some earplugs to reduce the sound. So again, that's something I used to do because walking down the street would be pretty triggering. So I just put earplugs in and that muffled everything, helped my nervous system stay a bit calmer, and I could just kind of hum to myself. A lot of people listen to music when they walk for that reason. So no one cares if you're wearing earplugs. It's not a weird thing. So yeah, very easy to do. Okay, number 3, change your response. That one sounds simple, often is not, because people get in like ruts or rhythms or habits of how they respond to their voices. And often people get angry or upset when they hear voices. So they might yell at the voices or rant at the voices or say, go away. Or like me, I used to be more of I get really upset and anxious and I curl up in a little ball and shake and cry and feel completely powerless. So, while we also want to accept and love all aspects of ourselves and not chastise us if we go into anger or we go into anxiety or whatever emotion we're feeling, if you can catch yourself, especially if you're not too distressed and you're just getting a little bit of voice activity, catch it early, you can start to change your response. There's a gap in there that you can begin to create from, instant reaction to what you normally would do to, wait a minute, I have a moment here. And usually the best thing to do in that gap is breathe. Take a few breaths, notice what's happening in your body, and try to stay as much as possible emotionally neutral. So these voices are carrying on around you. But if you can train yourself to stay emotionally neutral, that's going to give you way more options on how you could respond that are going to be more helpful. So, for example, instead of curling up in a ball and shaking and becoming completely um, uh, non-functional, which is what would happen to me, even in public places. And you can imagine that caused quite a lot of problems because then I would have to somehow manage to call my husband or someone would come and help me, or I would end up in an emergency. Yeah, so you can see how like there was a snowball effect of like of a negative response that I was essentially creating for myself. Um, but over time, I learned, to at least manage to get through situations like that to safety or call my husband or whatever. So slightly different responses. It doesn't have to be radical. You're not just suddenly going to turn into the Buddha and be all like la zen when you hear the voices, but incrementally you're training yourself to take more and more control over that experience, more and more control over your response. And honestly, guys, this is where the healing part comes in, because if you can take your power back, if you can reclaim your power from this experience, you will understand what an amazing person you are. You will see living proof of that, and you will learn a very important skill, because a lot of people give their power away, maybe not to voices, but maybe to other people in their lives or to shitty jobs that they don't like or whatever it might be, right? Some kind of crisis out there. It's someone else's fault. It's someone to blame. So as you start to take your own power back, your power lies in your response to the voices. This is good training for general life, good training for way beyond. Yeah. So we're going to try things like staying emotionally neutral as possible, focusing on your breath, being present with your body and your feelings. So the voices might be carrying on, but can you tune into what's happening in your body? Can you just be with that? That can be interesting as well. I found very useful to switch from the voice to the feeling and ask myself, what am I feeling in this moment? Never mind what the voices are saying. Usually it was something like fear, terror, but at least I'm labeling that. I'm getting in tune with the feeling, and the feelings reside in the body, not so much the mind. So you are shifting your attention. You can counter negative voices with positive affirmations or mantras. So for lots of people, that does have a positive effect and works very well with negative self-talk as well. And, again, you're going to have to persist on that one and just continually say the positive thing, but that can work too. And above all, nurture yourself. So when you are responding to voices, are you taking care of yourself? Or are you putting yourself in danger of some kind? Are you obeying the voices when they tell you to hurt yourself? Are you neglecting your hygiene and your food and your responsibilities or whatever? Think about how you can care for yourself in those moments. And it might be just as simple as, you know what, I'm going to curl up in bed and have a cup of tea and just lie here and listen to some nice music. That's a beautiful way to respond. How can I nurture myself? Okay, number 4. This is going to sound crazy to some of you, but it does actually work for lots and lots of people. Create a set time to listen to your voices. So we call this in voice hearing community negotiating with the voices. You're not getting rid of them, but you're setting some boundaries. You're saying, okay, wait a minute. If I give you my full attention for a short period of time each day, then your voices agree to leave you alone for the rest of the day. That's the deal. So what I used to do this myself. You can set aside 15 minutes, let's say, something like that, 10 minutes to half an hour, whatever feels, necessary for your voices. You might have a lot of voices that all want to have a chat with you. You can listen to them in your head or you can journal what they say. And when the time is up, firmly tell them that you're going to stop listening now and you'll come back again tomorrow. Now, this may not work in the sense that they just instantly obey you, but that you're going to stop listening now, that is within your power, right? Got to remember where your power is. And by not listening, you are either going now to do a distracting activity, you're going to listen to some music, you're going to hum, sing, go about your day, right? So again, this is a kind of a training for you and a training for your voices. And it's quite surprising. I know it can sound like a really nutty technique. It's quite surprising how often it works. And it did work for me, not all the time. When I got stressed, the voices would overwhelm me again. But on a general day-to-day living, it actually worked really well. So again, these are coping strategies for ordinary times, not for intense experiences. And you might find that just by training up this habit of every day, giving them a little bit of airtime, even if they're saying awful things, remember before in the golden rules, your voices may have a message for you. They might be useful. They might be performing some function in your psyche. And if we go really deep with this work, we often find that the angry, hostile voices are really just trying to protect us. They come from a time in our lives where we were experiencing a lot of trauma and they don't want us to get hurt again, or they believe that the world is very threatening or other people are threatening. And so they're constantly, keeping us small. Not always, but a lot of voices have that function. So this brings us to a very interesting technique, which I'm going to call the chicken coop / voice house. And I have to honor a lovely voice hearer that I work with up here on the Sunshine Coast who shared this technique with me. And I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. And she shared it in a training that we were running and someone else tried it and they had a bit of success as well. So it's a very creative example of voice negotiation. And this is what she did. So the prelude to this is that often people hear their voices most at nighttime as they're trying to get to bed. If you negotiate with your voices to listen to them at this time, they will probably like it, right? They're ready. They want to carry on at that time of night. And then when it's time for sleep, this is what my client did, or she was a colleague in the end. You can imagine calling them into a safe place in your mind. She visualized a chicken coop, right? And if for anyone that owns chickens, you've got to call them in at nighttime. They go chick, 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 and off they come running. And you might get them in the coop with a bit of scratch, a cup of scratch or chicken grain, right? So this is what she used. She imagined her voices all coming into this little chicken coop in her head and going to bed. She closed the door and off they go. So she then invited them every night. She would lie in bed and she would open up the chicken coop, let them out, let them say what they wanted to say, and then bring them back in, and they were good as gold. And this has worked for her for a number of years. So I think it's just such a lovely creative idea. And if you want to, you can play around. It doesn't have to be a chicken coop. It could be a house where the voices would like to live. One aspect of voice hearing, which is not necessarily in here, I don't think I've kind of spoken to this yet, but it is that voices often respond well to an alliance, when we kind of meet them halfway, this idea of negotiation. So, asking the voices, where do they want to live? Maybe they want to live in a penthouse or a tree house or a beach shack. I don't know. Just accommodating that as much as you can also has some very powerful results often. Cool. So that's a chicken coop. Another one is voice profiling. Now, I could spend a whole nother session on this, and I will probably do a video on it at some point. It's something that I also deliver in training, and it can take a couple of days to teach it fully. So I'm going to bare bones touch on it here. But it's a wonderful way to get to know your voices. And again, you might not want them in your life, but they are there. I'm sure you agree that you can't just snap your fingers and get rid of them. So if you can just open yourself up to activities like this and see what happens, because it can be very interesting way to kind of figure out what the next step might be in healing from this. So getting to know your voices, you can do this alone or with a support person, and just get a big piece of art paper, and then you're going to map out the names of your voices, or you're going to give them names if they don't already have names. Some people just call them the voices. So you could be a bit creative with this if you like. And you're going to write under each voice, if you hear multiple voices, their characteristics, such as what age and gender are they? When did you start hearing them? Where do you think they come from? What's your explanation for this? And do they remind you of anyone? That's always a really interesting one too. Not necessarily because they are that person or they even come from a trauma of that person, but they're linked to the trauma of that person. So let's say you believe that your voices are entities coming from other dimensions, but nonetheless, the dictatorial kind of abusive tone of the voice matches someone who also abused you in your past. That's a really interesting clue as to why you may now be vulnerable to hearing this kind of a voice. And also on the flip side, how you could heal that, how you could reclaim your power, forgive what happened, take care of yourself, all those things, heal from the feelings of that abuse. I mean, I know that that's not a simple thing to do, but the long-term game of this is ultimately healing, and it is possible. Now's a good time to mention that I made another Hearing Voices video, which I encourage you to watch, called Hearing Voices, A Deeper Understanding. And that goes into the different types of voices because, yeah, what we do with them ultimately and how we heal from them will vary depending on what your explanation is for the voices and what they are. Okay, cool. So I'll post that below. Number 7, compassion for yourself and your voices. If you come to understand your voices more, through things like voice profiling or keeping the voice diary, you could find compassion for them. If they are hostile voices, then know that hostility masks pain and fear. Likewise, cultivate compassion for yourself in your self-talk and your actions. So compassion is an all-encompassing energy that you can give to your voice hearing experience, to your voices, and to yourself at all times. And again, it's a practice. It's an energy. It's something that you can kind of gradually learn to lean into. But it's way more effective than hating on these voices, right? This doesn't seem to work. I have yet to meet a voice hearer that says to me, I hate my voices and I keep telling them to F off, and they do. It doesn't seem to work. Right. Now, I have a lot of theories about why that is, and I could go again into depth about emotional frequencies and how we create our reality from that place, but I just don't have time in this video. So, yeah, just know that the your emotional response is having a big effect on your voice hearing experience. So if you can cultivate compassion, that's a bit similar to the technique before where we try to get into emotional neutrality with that voice. It's going to help. It's going to at least help you, right? It's going to keep your nervous system more calm so that the voices don't have so much power over you. Okay, number 8, feel the feelings. This for me was probably one of my top methods of coping. And what I mean by that is voices often represent repressed emotions. So if you're hearing voices that are very angry, but you yourself don't identify as an angry person, it may be that they're actually a message about anger and how you need to integrate anger into your overall energy, right? Instead of exiling this emotion and treating it as bad or scary or horrible, allowing yourself to just feel anger, feel what it's like in the body, experience it without acting out on it. Same goes for any of the emotions, the shame. Oh my God. I mean, so many voices get shame activated because the voices are so nasty and trying to make you feel bad about yourself. So shame is a big one, and fear too. And of course, all of us want to run away from these feelings. Nobody likes to feel shame and fear and anger. However, if we can train ourselves to just be with the feeling, we find that it shifts. It just naturally shifts. That's what happens when we feel our feelings, right? And if you haven't learned that as a skill, you probably don't believe me. You're probably thinking, if I feel my feelings, I'm going to open a Pandora's box and I'll never stop feeling all the anger and the pain and the shame that's in there. But I can assure you that the well does run dry. And again, it's another topic, but I have made a video called Sitting with Distressing Feelings, which could be useful for that. But certainly feeling the feelings was a very big one for me. So I would be hearing the voices and I would just stop myself and go, wait a minute, what am I feeling? What feeling is being activated by these voices right now? And, and then just being with it and breathing into it was very helpful. Okay, number 9, we're nearly there. What's the message? Voices can be messengers. Their presence may tell you that you are stressed or in pain. At the very minimum, that's the message, right? More deeply, they could point to unresolved pain and trauma from your past. Researchers found that 70% of voice hearers report experiencing some kind of trauma before their voices started. Wow, that's a big percentage. And, perhaps many, many more do as well. Research is not always accurate. I have found 100, like I would say almost 100% of the people that I work with have experienced some kind of trauma that is linked to the voice hearing experiences. May not have caused it. I don't want to go that far, right? We have to be so careful with correlations and causes, but just to say that it's a contributing factor. And, if you have a whole bunch of contributing factors, like you're a really sensitive, empathic person and you experienced chronic bullying or abuse or, problems in your childhood or emotional neglect, it might not have been overt trauma. It might have been little t trauma, not capital T trauma that's kind of a bit more subtle. Like for me, I moved, immigrated countries when I was young, 12, and that's a type of trauma at that age because your identity is just trying to blossom, and here you are in a completely new country, having to adjust and belong to a whole new set of cultural norms. So, wow, that's painful to go through. My brother went through it too, but he's tougher than me. He doesn't have the same sensitive, empathic nature I do. So there's a whole lot of things that contribute to it, but certainly trauma, I would suggest, is probably in the picture. So think about the message that the voices are telling you, how they might be reflecting your inner pain, your inner wounds. Number 10, challenge the voices / reality testing. So this is a favorite of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapists. They like to do this one. Because the voices often claim to know all sorts of things, to be all powerful and to have control, right? This is why we feel that they have power over us, because they're claiming all these things and we can't see them. So how do we know? But is it true, right? Or is there some truth to it, but another way to view it as well, right? So it might be a mix. Might not be black and white, true or not true, but maybe a mix. Find a middle ground if needed. So, I'll give you an example. Voices, persecutory type voices telling you that the CIA or the secret shadow government are after you, right? Now, is it true? Well, there is some truth to it because we are being tracked and monitored by our phones and the internet, and there's an awful lot of data about you floating around that someone else is probably looking at, right? That seems to be a reality from what I can gauge with my research into the matter. So there is some truth to it, but are they specifically after you, right? You have to, this is to be gently questioned, just to ask yourself, how true is it? And you may not have the answers there. You might want to go and reflect with somebody. That's the power of reflection. It's very useful to go and get some different opinions and speak to trusted people and see if, you can come to a place where you're like, okay, well, maybe they're not all powerful. Maybe they know some things, but not all things, just again, the aim here is we're trying to reduce the power. Another thing might be causing paranoia in social situations, like that you sound like an idiot, these people don't like you. Is that true? Sometimes the is that true game is best to do when you're not under duress and hearing the voices themselves, but to do it rather in more of a therapy context when you're sorting through some of the themes with a peer worker or a therapist. But challenging the voices then to, so that you can continue to function, because these negative messages are likely to be keeping you trapped. So if you think nobody likes you or everybody's laughing at you, you're very unlikely to want to leave the house and speak up for yourself or go and follow your dreams, right? You could end up quite housebound and isolated, which is what happens, unfortunately, to many voice hearers, because it's so all-consuming and you start to believe it. So you've got to like chip away at that belief and challenge it just enough so it doesn't overwhelm you again, right? Just hold at least space for the idea that it might not be true, or it might be partially true, or you might be misinterpreting it or exaggerating it. Okay, we're nearly there. Two more to go. Number 11, call on your wise voice. This one was also very helpful for me, and I know helps a lot of people, because many voice hearers, they're hearing a lot of negative voices, but they also have somewhere deep inside them like an inner voice of wisdom or knowing, or maybe it's actually a kind of a voice that they listen to, like an angel or a guide or a grandmother that you once loved who's passed away. It can be any of these kinds of voices. And the energy of that voice must be non-judgmental, never forceful, never pushing you to do something, never trying to control you or say you must do this or else. No, that is not a wise, kind voice. The wise, kind voices speak gently, quietly, lovingly, and you learn to trust them by their energy. You can feel that. So you do need a bit of discernment here. I made another video called Hearing Voices, Are They Serving You? Which gives you a bit of a way to discern whether a voice is a goodie or a baddie. So it's good to be discerning. But ultimately, if you can tune into a wise voice, and you might not ever have heard it before, so I suggest you could actually journal to access your wise voice. I definitely did that. I would, take my troubles to a diary and make a question like, how am I going to get through this? Please, wise voice, tell me. And then some lovely wisdom would just drop in, right? And you just soak in that for a while and enjoy it and realize that actually that the light has just as much power. It's always more subtle because it never forces. So you have to tune in and listen to it. But if you can get there, great. And you can then grow that resource. You can consult with your wise voice often and call on it when you're feeling distress. It will become a habit. So that one is a really powerful one as well. Right, we are there now. The final one is, maybe it's another golden rule, really. I've probably circled back to the golden rules, but I'm going to call it small steps to wellness. So every day, set intentions for how you want to feel, right? I want to feel, you might not be able to aim for joy, but if you can, go there. But if you can't, just, I want to feel peace today, or I want to feel a bit of hope, or I want to feel supported, right? Just go for what you want every day. And it's going to be different every day. So you set your intention every day. Then take positive actions towards what you want, no matter how small, even if it means just getting out of bed or just having a shower or calling a friend. Yeah. Lots and lots of small choices add up to healing. That is how we get to healing, is lots and lots of small choices every single day, every breath, every moment. And we're going to slip back and make shitty choices, yes. But at the end of the day, the positive ones start to outweigh the negative ones. And then you get into like a rhythm with that, and it grows and it grows and it grows like a snowball. So the more aligned your choices are with your values, that's the other thing to think about when you want your choices. Like, what do I really want to cultivate in my life? What's important to me? So if my choice is to be loving towards other people and be in service, how can I do that? Help a neighbor, help an old lady with some groceries, whatever, adopt a cat, think of ways that you can enact and take action in alignment with your choices. And the more you do that, the stronger you will become. The more empowered you'll become, the more you will realize that you have power and know that you have power, the happier you will become. Small changes add up over time to something amazing. Have faith that you'll get there if you persist. And I'll end on my last message, which was beautifully created for me by someone who's assisting me with my social media. And she wrote this. She said, "You are not broken, you are becoming. You are not broken, you are becoming. You are not broken, you are becoming. You're becoming the wonderful new you. And this is a transition passage. And if you take action every day towards that which you wish to create, you will get there. These are ideas. That's all they are. Hopefully something has landed today, triggered joy in you, optimism, hope. Let that little flicker of excitement be your guide. Follow that, do that thing, and you'll get there. I promise. Right, that was a bit of a got it all out, and hopefully it wasn't too long. I've got no idea how long this video is going to be, but trusting that you stayed here to the end. So if you have, well done. Please check out the other videos. Please jump on my website because you can get this resource. I will have it there for you. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Namaste.